So I have some of the most bizarre flashbulb memories in my brain. Like, they confuse me sometimes. The things that my brain decides to hold onto in this world we live in. You know what a flashbulb memory is. It's one of those things, like you've probably heard, like I remember exactly what I was wearing or what was happening when I heard John F. Kennedy was assassinated, or heard about 9/11. You know, these big, earth-shattering moments, and your brain does this weird neurological thing where it sucks everything into a photograph. Well, my brain likes doing this, but it's for just weird things. One in particular that still I kind of wonder about every once in a while, and sticks out to me, and I don't really confess this to a lot of people, is, well, I've got to set the scene, because really, flashbulb memories are about the scene. So here I am. I am driving north on Prudence, driving away from my parents' house. I'm in college at the time, and I'm actually, at this point, I'm watching my parents' house, which is kind of good. This worked out. They are in Disneyland, which you'd think I'd be kind of annoyed about, you know, like they ditch me and my parents go to Disneyland, but there's also context to this. See, my parents are probably in Disneyland because they had that fight that they were supposed to have like 6 months earlier, and while all these emotions are happening, what we as Millers do is we sweep it under the rug and we go to the happiest place on earth. I shouldn't be surprised that I'm a child of a divorce, but you know, like, it works out. Anyway, so the great thing about this though is that I'm also the baby of the family, and that my parents, when I left, developed an acute case of empty nest syndrome. And with this was also this very rampant case of Costcoitis. And so all of their refrigerator, all their shelves are completely swollen with enormous tubs of hummus and more feta than you would even imagine. And the amount of frozen chicken breasts that they were able to get into their, it was magical, especially magical as a college student. Because what I had done at that point, and what was sitting in my back seat, was all of that was a martyr. I had completely relieved the swollenness of their, I had made healthy the refrigerator and their cabinets, and I was now taking it back to campus with me. So I'm driving along, back to the scene. Up Prudence, all of the laundry not folded but washed behind me, pulling up to a red light, and at this point, I'm doing something that 8-year-old me would have hated, rolled my eyes at. I'm listening to NPR. Because I'm educated at this point, and you know, Steve Inskeep, the morning edition, is what you do at this point. So, driving along, come up to a red light, and the moment happens. It's a February morning, kind of cold, I've got my coffee there, and Steve Inskeep utters the words, "Fred Rogers has died." And it freezes. The world crystallizes at that moment. Mr. Rogers is dead. And I still kind of sit in this moment and I'm like, I see it now. I see the cars that are passing in front of me. I see the sky. I know that moment intimately. It's a flashbulb moment for me. And I remember driving to the U of A, and at this point I've been at the U of A for a while, and so, you know, you've got a swagger as, you know, you're 4 years on campus and you're walking around, and I am kind of depressed at this point because a hero of mine has died. But not that I admit that to anyone on campus. I mean, there are some people that, you know, it's like Batman or Superman, like these men in capes, and I was, like, a guy in a cardigan was the person who I was. So, I'm walking around and I'm trying to figure this out, because that's what I do. I try to figure out myself, and as you can see, I'm kind of bizarre up here. And I realized why I love Fred Rogers. You see, every time you watch the show, and as a little kid, like, he would come in and be kind of in business attire, and he'd put on this sweater, and he'd ask you, like, how are you doing? Like, what's going on? Like, you know, and he'd invite you into this world. And then he had this magical, like, picture frame, and you got to see these worlds of, like, where peanut butter was made, or, like, Crayola crayons, like, magical wax that created these instruments of art, and you were like, that's amazing. Or how you actually harvest potatoes. And then he had this trolley that he talked to that talked back in bells, and we'd go to this amazing land where you had finger puppetry and depressed lions who lived in clocks, and royalty who had last names that were days of the week, and this woman who lived in a carriage carousel named Lady Elaine Fairchild that I knew was up to no good, and that she would do things with that boomerang, and I would be really, really like, she shouldn't live there. But she was part of this neighborhood. And the awesome thing about Fred Rogers, and it was the question every single week, was, won't you be my neighbor? Like, he lived life in this way where he said, this is the magical world that I live in. You might call making peanut butter mundane, but it's magical. And you might call Crayola crayons and this wax sort of thing, but don't pause, look at this. This is sweet and awesome. And let's go to a world where, things are kind of messy at times. And, yeah, sure, Daniel the lion is shy and depressed, but that's okay. And, we're okay with Lady Elaine Fairchild, and we kind of put up with her, and it's rough around the edges. But he did everything in his power inside this box, behind the screen, to say, come live in my neighborhood. Come be my neighbor. And so I walked around campus, and I'm sad, because who's going to be the champion? Who's going to be the person inviting us to be neighbors? Who's carrying that torch now? And so, I'm bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I will carry this torch. I will carry that torch. So I tell myself that. And then I kind of go around, and as people are asking me, why are you depressed? I'm like, I'm embarrassed, so I'm not going to tell you. And my torch bearing becomes a little less, bright and shiny in that moment. But what I often do in this moment is that I journal about it. Because I don't know about you, but the idea of having neighbors, like Fred Rogers neighbors, like experience my world neighbors, of, come experience what's going on. It may be bizarre and a little strange, and it may not be the happiest place on earth, but come experience it. That's what I want. And so I remember one day I'm sitting drinking coffee, and it's not quite as crystalline of a moment, but it was poignant nonetheless. I'm sitting journaling, with this idea of how do you do life well, how do you be neighbors and all of that, and the doorbell rings. That's weird, who rings a doorbell anymore? I'm not expecting anyone. So I go to the front door, and do that kind of what? Open the door and look, and there's a neighbor across the street. And in this kind of shy, sheepish, do we still do this anymore type thing, she actually asks for eggs. And I'm like, oh, I have eggs. So I go and I grab the eggs and very kind of sheepishly, open the security gate, and I'm like, here are your eggs. Good luck with your baking. And I move on, close the gate, and then close the door, and sit back down in my journal. And I realize I'm a man in a box who wants to stay behind his screen. And then I wonder, what kind of torchbearer am I? And so I sit here with stories, and I sit here wondering, how as people do we invite people to, enjoy life? As our brains suck in all of this information and says, the scene's important, the story's important, the people around you are important. And there's the ghost of Fred Rogers, who fought so much to get outside of that box and through that screen to say, be my neighbor. I sit there journaling and thinking about it. And so, I take risks now, and I try to be a torchbearer. Which is why I'm here for the first time. And so, what I hope, and while I realize that I can't control this crazy brain inside me, is that I hope that this moment, this crazy painting here, I remember so vividly in the future. And stories of popoas and of really good food that I'll never be able to say, but I always want to taste. These moments, and each and every one of you will become crystallized in this moment, and that my brain, in some fascinating, magical way, will make the most of this beautiful day. Because since we're together, I might as well say, would you be mine?